My audio career, in quotations, starts in mid-70s at the University of Waterloo. Was holding a nighttime Saturday afternoon job at various audio sales stores in Waterloo and in Kitchener, and selling all kinds of what were then very popular brands, some of which still exist today, like Boston Acoustics and so on, and JBL as well. And it was my hobby at the same time, and of course was very opinionated on what I was selling. A friend of mine and I decided that we were going to go into the business of making loudspeakers, and we thought, or I thought of myself maybe as a bit of a marketer, and we came up with a scheme to make a small powered system. Everybody at that time wanted speakers that were the size of refrigerators, and we made this little 2.1 powered system with two little satellites and a powered subwoofer. And it sounded fabulous, frankly, but of course the world out there went, what's that? $1,500 for two little boxes? Forget about it. That's okay. Finished university eventually. Came out of there with a degree. Actually, a couple of things that I did do while there is took some math courses and some human physiology of hearing as well as the psychoacoustics of hearing, which were rather interesting courses because they had in particular rather interesting results from real live tests of human subjects on how they heard, what they heard, and learned a great deal that made a mockery of most of what you read in magazines, right? Which was all kinds of black magic and wonderful woolly stories about how people heard and what sounded good. Here was real physical scientific evidence of how people actually heard. So when I got out of school with one of those useless arts degrees, I went and worked for a company in Toronto, a small loudspeaker company called Angstrom, which also still exists. One of the things that company actually had was an owner who liked Floyd Toole's work at the NRC. And off I went to the NRC, where I learned that, lo and behold, there's a whole loudspeaker industry out there that was missing the point, which was Floyd's work there. And certainly it came as a revelation to me that you could do this systematically and with certain goals in mind and a roadmap to those goals. Like I say, that was a revelation, but unfortunately those times were that was the very early 80s, maybe the late 70s, in fact, maybe 79 or 80. And the economy went into the tank, and that company went out of business. I had just finished a design for them. And that company, unfortunately, wasn't going to take advantage of that design. And what happened then is Paradigm started. And that was its first product, in fact, the Model 9. Worked like crazy people, ate, slept, and breathed speakers for 3 or 4 years and burnt myself out, essentially. And also never even then actually thought of myself as in the business, in the loudspeaker business. At any rate, what happened is I took a year off and did a few things and then wound up getting another proposition, this time in OEM business, more or less. And we started a company that manufactured eventually for almost the who's who in loudspeakers. Our main customers were, and here in Toronto, at that time, JBL, Infinity, Yamaha, JVC, KEF, Celestion, just about all kinds of companies. And we were actually, I would say, without question that we were the largest OEM manufacturer in Canada, but we were also significant out there in the world and responsible for a couple of sort of industry firsts. Amongst them being the first commercially viable and commercially successful Class D amplifier. We built several 100,000 Class D amplifiers in subwoofers. We were, as far as I know, the first to use structural resins in loudspeakers. That was the first one I managed to talk somebody actually into doing that was COS. And we built a loudspeaker that had a cabinet built from structural engineering resins, what are now quite commonplace, but in mid-'80s were unheard of in loudspeakers. We did a loudspeaker that was extruded, which was at that time quite unheard of as well. Now you see them everywhere, a variety of people do them, but at that time it was unusual. Our introduction into the world of subwoofers, we thought were just at that time, you saw a few companies making expensive subwoofers. This is now 89, something like that, maybe 90, when we thought we could do this cheaper and maybe make it popular, help make it popular. So we presented a product to JBL actually and sold, again, tonnage of those things. Eventually, it became the case that we were we were subwoofers are us, we called them ourselves. A variety of people thought that we were sort of the originators of that, but of course we weren't. Eventually, as that business became more and more competitive and the prices started to come down, we did things like look for ways of dealing with some of those dollars. And we came up with a Class D that went right down to 50 watts, and we still, to this day, there is nobody making that type of subwoofer out of Class D. It was very successful. Then, eventually, keeping the Asian tied back wouldn't work anymore, and we found ourselves unable to compete, essentially. So I rejoined Paradigm as now herd cats for a living, and having actually a very good time doing it. Playing the old uncle advisor to a bunch of very talented people who really keep you young and keep you on your toes. And I try to stay up with them, but they usually, thank God, outrun me. I find it odd nowadays, frankly. If you would have asked me 25 years ago that would I still be in the speaker business and still doing what I'm doing, I would have looked at you like you just fell off a spacecraft, and not an earthbound one. But I guess there's an expression in the industry, speaker guy forever, right? Speaker guys just are speaker guys, and somehow you just wind up staying that way.